Hello, space travelers. Welcome to the channel where people create stories about the universe. Get ready for a new adventure.
The Academy didn't frame dominance disputes as fights. Instead, they referred to them as corrections. Species that evolved in strict hierarchies treated conflict like a hands-on lesson. If a cadet failed to understand their place, someone else would make it clear. Pain, to them, was just another way of communicating. Instructor Adrian Cross had been supervising these situations for 12 cycles. Over time, he'd figured out when to just observe and when to step in. Most of the time, things wrapped up fast. Usually, it was just a shove or a quick flash of teeth or claws. One side backed off, and that was the end of it. Lesson learned. I stood at the edge of the training floor with my arms crossed, watching the afternoon rotation kick off. Among the cadets was me, Ethan Cole, 31 years old, no enhancements, no armor beyond the standard Academy gear. By their standards, I didn't stand out. I was average height, lean, and had nothing built into my body that could be used as a weapon. According to my file, my endurance was moderate, my strength fell short compared to a lot of predator species, and my reflexes were just decent. There was nothing in there that suggested I'd be a problem. On the other side of the floor, though, another cadet had already noticed me. Dorian Vex came from a predator species that thrived on pack hierarchy and ritual combat. He was tall, heavily built, with forward-facing eyes that locked on to things. His kind respected visible strength and hated restraint, often mistaking it for weakness. Dorian Vex watched me as I went through my warm-up drills. I didn't look at him, and that turned out to be my first mistake. He moved closer, his shadow falling over my stance. He loomed there, letting his size do the talking. I finished my drill, stood up straight, and finally looked at him. My face didn't show any challenge or submission, just awareness. Cross noticed that, but didn't step in. This kind of thing was normal. It was a test, a moment where one cadet decided whether the other would back down. Dorian Vex leaned in and spoke in his own language first, then switched to common. "You're standing in my space," he said. I glanced at the markings on the floor, then shifted half a step to the side, not backward, just out of the way. "Didn't mean to," I told him. That should have been the end of it, but Dorian Vex let out a low snarl. He hadn't heard the fear he expected in my voice. "You move when I tell you," he shot back. I met his gaze again, calm, my breathing steady. "I already did," I said. Cross shifted slightly. What started as posturing was turning into something more focused. He got ready to step in if things went further. Dorian Vex started circling me, brushing my shoulder lightly as he passed. Not enough to hurt, just enough to remind me he was there. Around us, a few cadets slowed down their drills to watch. Dominance disputes always pulled attention. That was part of the point. I didn't turn toward him or square up. I kept my posture neutral and moved on to the next station. Dorian Vex let out a sharp laugh. Then he followed me and shoved me from behind. I stumbled forward a step but caught myself before I fell. I didn't turn around right away. Cross raised a hand slightly. This was usually the moment instructors stepped closer. Still within limits, but getting close. I turned slowly. My breathing had changed. Deeper now, more controlled. "Don't do that again," I said, my voice low. It wasn't loud enough to demand attention, but it carried. Dorian Vex saw something in me then, something he didn't understand. I wasn't showing any obvious threat. No raised hands, no crouch, no signal. I just stood there, and that threw him off. Predator species read movement, tension, any sign a strike was coming. I gave him none of that, so he attacked. It was quick, a heavy swing aimed at the side of my head. Not to kill, just to assert dominance. I moved, not backward, I stepped inside his strike, bringing my forearm up to block it. The impact cracked hard, bone against bone. Dorian Vex hissed, caught off guard. I grabbed his wrist and twisted, not with force but with precision. His own momentum worked against him. Pulling him forward, I stepped in again, closing the gap, too close for him to use claws or teeth effectively. Then I struck once, short, controlled, right into the upper chest where the nerves cluster. He gasped. I let go of his wrist and stepped back. He staggered, his legs given out beneath him. First he dropped to one knee, then both. His breathing turned uneven. The whole thing was over in less than 3 seconds. Cross had already started moving when the strike began. By the time he reached us, I was standing still again, arms at my sides. My chest rose and fell steadily, sweat darkening the fabric at my collar, my jaw tight. Dorian Vex was on the ground, alive, conscious. But he couldn't get up. The training floor went completely quiet. Cross quickly checked him over. No blood, no visible broken bones. Dorian Vex was breathing, hurt, but not dying. Then Cross looked at me. "What happened?" he demanded. I didn't take my eyes off the cadet on the floor. "He told me to move," I said. "I did." I paused. He didn't stop. Cross felt it then, a chill creeping in. This wasn't anger. It wasn't panic. It was a decision. Medical staff rushed in, stabilized Dorian Vex, and carried him off. He'd recover. His pride probably wouldn't, at least not any time soon. Cross dismissed the rest of the cadets, ending training early. I stayed where I was until someone told me to leave. I didn't argue. I didn't celebrate either. As I walked off the floor, I could feel other cadets watching me differently now, more cautious. Cross remained behind, replaying everything in his head. He'd seen plenty of fights before, long ones, brutal ones, meant to send a message. But this hadn't been like that at all. I hadn't postured, I hadn't escalated, I just ended it. And that's when it hit him. Slowly but uncomfortably, he hadn't stepped in too late because he was slow. He'd been too late because I'd already finished before the academy rules even had time to catch up. The academy didn't suspend me. That surprised a lot of cadets. Instructor Adrian Cross filed the whole thing as a concluded dominance dispute with medical outcome. The wording mattered. Concluded meant it was over before things could escalate. Medical outcome meant no one had to step in to stop it. Still, the footage got flagged for review. The next morning, I stood alone in a small evaluation chamber. Neutral lighting, no restraints. There were no visible observers behind the glass. Cross walked in, carrying a data slate, accompanied by another instructor, Lena Graves, whose species specialized in behavioral analysis. Graves stayed quiet as she studied me. Her eyes followed everything, my breathing, posture, even slight muscle tension. "You're not showing stress markers that usually come with violent conflict," she said. I gave a small shrug. It was over fast. Cross didn't like how simple that sounded. "Dorian Vex outweighs you by a lot," he said. "His species has natural weapons. Why didn't you disengage when he approached?" I glanced down at the floor for a second, then looked back up. "Because he wasn't dangerous yet." Graves tilted her head slightly. "Define dangerous." "When he started putting his hands on me," I answered, after I told him to stop. Cross and Graves exchanged a look. Predator species usually escalated through that kind of contact. Apparently, humans drew the line somewhere else. "You understand that dominance disputes are allowed," Cross said. "You could have backed down." I nodded. "I did. I moved." "That was the first thing I did." Graves tapped on her slate. "But you didn't submit." I frowned a little. "I'm not part of his hierarchy." There was no attitude in my voice, just a simple statement. Cross leaned forward. "Then why end it so quickly?" I took a bit longer to think about that one. "Because if I let it keep going," I said, someone ends up more hurt, him, me, or whoever steps in. Graves spoke again. You calculated that in the moment? Yeah, I said. Cross felt something tighten in his chest. Calculated violence wasn't new to him. What bothered him was how detached it sounded. Your strikes were precise, Graves said, and you didn't follow up after he went down. There was no reason to, I replied. He couldn't continue. Cross remembered the look in my eyes, not anger, just focus. When did you decide how it would end? He asked. I held his gaze. When he shoved me from behind. The room went quiet. Graves broke the silence. You didn't posture. You didn't threaten. Why not? I shrugged again. Posturing just gives people time to make bad decisions. That was enough for Cross. He ended the evaluation right there. Outside the chamber, rumors were already spreading across the academy. Predator species cadets reviewed the footage in private, going over it frame by frame. They expected to find a trick, a mistake, maybe just luck. They didn't find any. I hadn't used strength to win. I'd used timing and distance. I got in close, too close for natural weapons to matter, and ended it before things could escalate. To them, that was unsettling. Dorian Vex woke up later that same day. He was hurt, but nothing permanent, just nerve shock, muscle lock, and a bruised ego. When they told him the review decision, he didn't react. When they showed him the footage, he watched it without saying a word. At the end, he looked away. He didn't roar, Dorian Vex said quietly. He didn't threaten. The medic nodded. He didn't give me time, Dorian Vex continued. Predators give time. They show teeth. They circle. The medic stayed silent. He was there, Dorian Vex said. Then it was over. Back on the training floor, things changed. Some cadets started avoiding me completely. Others kept their distance but watched closely. A few tried talking to me. Careful, respectful. I didn't change anything. I trained, ate, rested, and spoke when someone spoke to me. Instructor Cross kept a close eye on me over the next cycle. He didn't see aggression, dominance, or intimidation unless someone crossed a clear line. And when that happened, the shift was immediate, not explosive, just final. That's when Cross started to understand the real issue. The Academy believed dominance disputes followed a process: warning, escalation, then resolution. Humans didn't follow that pattern. We put up with pressure quietly. We tried to de-escalate when we could. But once we decided something wasn't acceptable anymore, we skipped everything in between. No posturing. No drawn-out escalation. We just ended it. And by the time an instructor realized what was happening, there was nothing left to stop. After the incident, the Academy scheduled a mandatory review, not for me, but for everyone else. Instructor Adrian Cross stood at the front of a lecture hall while the footage played behind him on a large display. No sound, just movement. A shove, a turn, 3 seconds. One cadet standing, one on the ground. The room was packed. Predator species sat stiff and focused. Non-predator species leaned forward, clearly tense. Humans sat quietly in the back, faces neutral. Cross let the clip loop twice before speaking. This recording is now required viewing, he said, not as a warning, as instruction. A clawed hand raised from the third row. Instructor, the cadet said, the human broke dominance protocol. Cross nodded. Yes. Murmurs spread through the room. He should have displayed, someone else added. There was no challenge exchange. Cross didn't argue. Correct. Then why wasn't he disciplined? Cross paused before answering. Because the protocol assumes both sides are using the same social language. The room went silent. Cross pointed to the frozen frame where I stepped inside the strike. Predator species escalate to establish dominance, he explained. They depend on threat displays, reach, and anticipation. The human didn't engage with that system at all. A low growl came from one of the Predator cadets. "That's dishonorable." Cross turned toward him. "It's unfamiliar," he said. "There's a difference." He advanced the footage frame by frame. "Watch the timing," Cross said. "The human doesn't wait for confirmation. He doesn't exchange signals. The moment he decides the situation isn't safe anymore," another cadet finished the thought, "he ends it." "He could have killed Dorian Vex," someone added. "Yes," Cross said, "but he chose not to." That got everyone's attention. "He targeted nerves, not vital organs," Cross continued, "and he stopped the moment the threat was over." He let that sink in. "The unsettling part isn't the violence," he said. "It's the lack of ritual. Predator species relied on ritual. Structured conflict reduced the chance of death. It gave both sides time to think, to back out. Humans didn't need that. We followed a different system." After the lecture, Cross walked the training grounds watching the cadets. They were more careful now. People started keeping their distance. Contact became intentional, not careless. And no one shoved me again. Later that same day, Cross found me alone in a smaller gym, running through slow, controlled movement drills. No music, no crowd, just repetition. He stood off to the side of the mat. "You're changing how the academy behaves," he said. I paused and looked up. "Wasn't trying to." "I know," he replied. He watched me finish my set and stand there, breathing steady, my focus turned inward. "You don't chase dominance," Cross said. I shook my head. "Not interested." "Still," he continued, "others see you as dominant now." I thought about that for a second. "That's their decision." Cross studied me closely. "Your species has hierarchy." "Yeah," I said, "but we don't enforce it on strangers." He frowned. "Explain that." I grabbed a towel and wiped my hands. "If someone wants authority over me, they've got to earn it by taking responsibility, not by making me afraid." Cross felt something click into place. Predator species built hierarchy on visible strength, on forcing others to back down. Humans did it differently. "And if someone tries to force it?" he asked. I met his eyes. "Then it's not about hierarchy anymore. It's about safety." That word stuck with him. The academy treated dominance disputes like lessons because they were supposed to define social order. But I hadn't clarified anything about hierarchy. I'd drawn a line, and that difference mattered. Later in the cycle, Dorian Vex was cleared to return to limited training. He stayed out of my way, not just out of fear, but because he understood now. When someone asked him why, he kept it simple. He didn't want to fight, he said, and when he did, it was already over. That night, Cross reviewed the incident again. That's when he realized something. The Academy's policy had a blind spot. It assumed conflict built up step by step. Humans didn't work like that. We took the pressure, watched, and made a call. And once that decision was made, there was no escalation to interrupt, just the result. Cross added a note to Academy doctrine. Human cadets do not posture. Lack of visible threat does not mean submission. Intervention timing must be adjusted. He knew people would argue about it. He also knew it was already too late. The footage had already done its job, not through brutality, but through speed. By the time authorities stepped in, I'd already decided it was over. The Academy didn't make a big announcement about any of this. No one said the policy had failed. Instead, instructors quietly received updated guidelines, new intervention timing, revised behavioral notes. There was a single page about human cadets, and it was longer than entire sections for other species. Instructor Adrian Cross read it twice. Humans do not posture. Lack of visible threat is not de-escalation. Once a human sets a verbal boundary and it gets crossed, resolution can happen instantly. Cross closed the file and leaned back. He thought about the moment I turned. Not angry, not scared, just done putting up with it. That image stuck with him. I went through the rest of my training cycle without any more incidents. Nobody tested me again. Not because they were scared of me the way predators fear a dominant rival, but because they understood something about me now. I didn't want control. I just wanted space. And that idea spread faster than any rumor. Weeks later, during a mixed-species sparring session, one cadet accidentally stepped into my path. It was nothing serious, just a light bump of shoulders. I stopped and looked at him. He froze. I stepped aside without saying a word and kept going. A few people nearby let out quiet breaths. Cross watched it all from the edge of the floor. That's when it hit him how much effort I'd been putting in before the incident. Making space, avoiding problems, letting small things slide. The academy had mistaken that for weakness. Later on, Cross got called in front of a review board. Senior instructors, behavior specialists, even a civilian observer. They played the footage again, this time with analysis layered over it. One of the senior instructors spoke first. "The speed of resolution is concerning." Cross nodded. "It's also what stopped it from escalating." "Or it could have turned lethal," another one argued. Cross met his eyes. "But it didn't." The civilian leaned forward. "Because the human chose restraint." "Yes," Cross said, "but not hesitation." That was the key difference. By the end of the meeting, they gave it a new classification. Human conflict response is boundary-based. Do not depend on escalation signals. Intervene early once a verbal warning is given. They didn't say it outright, but it was clear. They'd been wrong before. Dorian Vex returned to full duty before the cycle ended. He didn't look for payback. He didn't challenge me again. In private counseling, he explained why. "I thought his stillness meant fear," he said. "On my world, that means submission." "And on his," the counselor asked, "it means he's waiting." "Waiting for what?" Dorian Vex answered. "For the moment it matters." We crossed paths one more time in the corridor outside the mess hall. There were people around. Dorian Vex stopped and gave a slight nod. Not submission, just acknowledgement. I nodded back and kept walking. That was it. The footage didn't fade away. They added it to the first-year curriculum under a new category, non-ritualized conflict resolution. Now, cadets watched it differently, not to copy the moves, not for the spectacle, but for what wasn't there. No extra force, no punishment, no dominance beyond what was necessary, just an ending. Instructor Cross stood at the back of the hall during one of those viewings, watching how the new cadets reacted. Predator species leaned forward, clearly confused, while the non-predators looked uneasy. One of them raised a hand. "Why didn't he stop when the instructor moved in?" the cadet asked. Cross didn't sugarcoat it. "Because by the time authority recognized what was happening, it was already over." Another voice spoke up. "Is that dangerous?" Cross took a second before answering. "Yes, if it's misunderstood." After the session ended, Cross headed out to the outer track where cadets trained alone. I was there, jogging at an easy, steady pace. No one else around. He fell into step beside me for a moment. "You've changed how we teach," he said. I kept running. "That wasn't the plan." "I know," he replied, "but it happened anyway." I slowed down, then came to a stop, looking out across the field. "People think not fighting means you just let things happen," I said. "That's not it." I glanced over at him. "It means you decide when it's over." Cross nodded slowly. "Do you regret it?" I thought about that for a second. "No," I said. "I just wish it hadn't been necessary." That, he understood. As the cycle wrapped up, the academy slipped back into its normal rhythm. Training drills, evaluations, the occasional dispute. But something had changed underneath it all. Cadets stopped assuming that quiet ones were easy targets. Instructors didn't wait around for ritual signals before stepping in anymore, and humans moved through it all the same way we always had. Calm, steady, and unreadable. The footage stayed part of the required curriculum. Not because of the violence, but because of what it revealed. There's a difference between someone who threatens and someone who decides. Humans don't posture. We don't drag things out. When someone pushes past a clear line, we end it. Fast, clean, no extra show. The instructor didn't fail to stop it in time. He just never had the chance.